Good afternoon. Have you guys, we've been talking about AI at all today yet? So good news is we're going to build on that in our session. So first of all, I want to introduce ourselves and Agio Workplace Engagement, and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. So we can kind of dive in here. Sorry, there we go. We're going to talk today about how do we scale the challenge for a lot of HR professionals, right? How do we recreate culture inside this AI age? How do we, really think about the utilization of the systems and technologies and not necessarily get caught up in the tools itself, but really how do we actually augment culture in a way using the full capabilities of AI? So as we get into this, it's really about this concept of intersection point between culture and strategy. We are Agio Workplace Engagement. We're actually out of Minneapolis, headquartered in Minneapolis. So we come here today with certainly lots of things in our heads, but we're super excited about being here. As I was introduced, Matt Garrett, our COO and CMO, and I'm here with Sarita Parikh, who runs our product. Agio itself really is focused on one kind of core central focus point, which is really to help our clients create a culture in environments where employees are empowered, cultures are strengthened, and this idea of engagement actually moves from a nice to have into a strategic asset. A lot of our clients, we work in HR primarily, they are struggling with how do we use technology in a way that's just not system oriented, but actually becomes the foundation of culture itself. So we're going to dive into that today. Our journey is going to go about this. So I'm going to hand it over to Sarita in a bit. We're going to go and talk about use case. And then we're going to build on that use case and then turn it into how do we actually enable and re-envision that use case through two primary frameworks that we'll introduce and allow you guys to kind of maybe take that away as a consideration point. Those frameworks will then be augmented, and we'll show how we actually take that into considerations where AI actually takes it and actually develops and unlocks the intent and the opportunity that we have as HR professionals when we're balancing all these other priorities out, right? I mean, HR environments, as I'm going to sit here and tell you what you already live in all the time, but we've got AI in terms of how we use those tools. We've got return to office mandates, or how do we re-envision hybrid work? And then the last piece is like, okay, now along with all that, we have skill development. How do we take all that in a pressurized environment and figure out a way to actually rebuild the culture that we have inside our companies we work with? And so that's kind of where we're going to kind of hopefully take you on a bit of a journey in the next 19 minutes. So with that, I'll turn it over to Sarita and let you start.
Hi, everyone. I'm Sarita Parikh. I lead product and analytics at Agio Workplace, and along with Matt, I am one of the sponsors of our AI Innovation Lab. Really glad to be here today, although it's very chilly in Atlanta. I wasn't looking forward to that. So at Agio Workplace, as Matt said, our job is to drive engagement at the workplace. And that means many things, but it means, of course, driving appreciation, driving connection, helping people grow, find opportunities to grow their skills, their soft skills, and more than anything, to create this culture of belonging at scale within an organization. And to do that effectively, we have to be able to stand in the shoes of the people we serve. So that means not just understanding the metrics, 18% of people think this and 25% of people think that. It means actually talking to real employees to understand, what does a typical day look like? What are your goals and aspirations? What are pain points that you have? Really trying to build that empathy-based practice. For any of you here, you might be familiar with the term human-centered design. We're human-centered designers. And in our human-centered design work, this means that we've talked with hundreds of people from different industries, so retail and healthcare and manufacturing and number of different airlines we were just saying. We've also talked with people at every level in an organization. So even like ground level people who might be working like in a fast food restaurant, individual contributors working in offices, managers, supervisors, all the way up to senior leaders. And amongst these different industries and these different roles, the jobs, of course, are very, very different. But when you go down to the core of what it is that motivates people, what it is that helps people feel like they belong, that they're in a safe space, those things are very, very similar. And so in our research, we've identified dozens of findings, but one of the big findings that we really want to dive into today is about engagement and how do you build engagement, and how people often think engagement is very much about these like kind of large moments like picnics and get-togethers and things like that. But really engagement is something that's sustained day to day. So those small moments that happen throughout the day for every person, finding a way to really use AI to help maximize those. So I'm excited to talk about this.
Yeah. Well, let's kick it off and go through the use case.
Okay. So again, I've actually sat in on many of these interviews. There was one that particularly stood out to me that I wanted to talk about today. I talked with a woman named Sammy. She is a data analyst, so she builds like dashboards, like Tableau reports, those sorts of things. And she had been in her role for about 1.5 years and was a superstar. She was doing great. And so she went to a one-on-one with her boss, Max, and she said, Max, I feel like I've stretched as much as I can in this role. I'm ready for more. I really think you should put me into more client-facing opportunities. I would love to grow and build those skills. I'd love a mentor. And as she's talking with her boss, Max, who was truly, like, genuinely vested in Sammy's success, like really took this role of leadership and helping to build people, help people build their careers, help them build their skills. He took this very seriously. And so as they were chatting, they were talking through opportunities that Sammy might be able to pursue, people that she might want to know, all of these things that could help sort of sustain and drive her growth. So it was a great one-on-one. Sammy felt really like bolstered by it. She was super excited. And she went back to regular work. She had her week. She had some great successes, all of those sorts of things. And she came back to her one-on-one the next week, super psyched, like excited to hear, like, what new ideas does Max have? What should we be doing? Max had a week, like all managers do. And so he said, so Sammy, what do you want to talk about? And Sammy's like, well, I want to continue our conversation from last week. And Max is like, sorry, Sammy, can you remind me what happened?
Yeah. And that I think what's really interesting about that is it's not on Max, for failing to do his job, or on the intent of the program that they're involved in. It was really just about the system that broke down. Mm-hmm. And because the design of the system didn't incorporate the needs and the magnitude of what Max is trying to balance and the needs of the individual with Sammy, that Sammy had really specific things that were being lost. Mm-hmm. And those are the things that I think is where the opportunity I think that we see, mm-hmm. where AI really is helpful, is to find those moments that normally get lost and elevate them. Mm-hmm.
So we also had a chance to chat with Max because I think Sammy was a little bit, not miffed, but a little disappointed. And so what we learned with talking with Max is that he, like most managers and probably like many people in this room, is a working manager. So he has a great one-on-one with someone, and then he goes to a completely different topic, putting out fires all week, dealing with budget changes. You could put in 40 hours, and that's never going to be enough. And you could put in 50 and 60 hours, it's never going to be enough. I feel this way. I feel like I could work 12 hours, and I could still do 6 more hours and still not get through my day. And so how can someone who has that much on their plates, is constantly context switching, this is a great place for AI to help. How can we help them be more effective, find the moments that are important to them as leaders, find the moments that are important to help their teams grow, to help each individual on their team grow? How do we help pull all of these things together so that the right information come to the right people at the right time?
And so this is where HR really comes into play here. And because, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge to solve this part of the day in, day out of the role is fundamental. It's how do I scale connection? Mm-hmm. How do you support growth, recognizing and realizing that growth is redefined and defined by every individual on a one-on-one basis? So you have to do that at scale. And then how do you keep those contributions that your team members are doing day in, day out visible? So because they want that emotional lift to say like, oh, I'm seen for my performance. I'm seen on what I'm bringing to the organization. How do you do that in a way across all of your environments, whether that's, back to office or hybrid or some other type of mix, a distributed environment? That is the challenge. And so with that, it's impossible to find a program and create a program that's going to address all of that. And because really what comes out of that is culture doesn't scale through programs. It actually scales, as I mentioned earlier, when we're using systems that ultimately support this idea of human behavior. How do we identify what's unique about that individual? And so one of the things that we have actually developed with and find incredibly valuable as we're talking about designing environments and cultures with our clients is what we call the cultural connection flywheel. So this is our first framework that we'll introduce today is really looking at how you build a culture that really relies on four components, which is recognition, connection, participation, and growth. And what that really means is about how do we find moments or enable moments of connection where we reinforce the values of the culture that we're trying to build on. How do we kind of create experiences of growth and recognition that ultimately move to a shared sense of meaning and belonging? And these four elements, and as we support it, what's interesting about each of them are connected and fuel the next. So recognition drives connection, let me see if I got that right. Yep, it drives connection. Connection drives participation. Participation drives growth. And it keeps building. All of that then ultimately creates enough momentum where belonging to a culture is established. And that's the goal of what we're trying to do.
So back to this idea of engagement and those day-to-day moments. So we often think about, I've been in many, many organizations. I've been in many large enterprise organizations. And there's kind of like the summer picnic, like the all hands that's once a month, like these big events. And one thing I found, sort of a metaphor that I think about is like for anyone who goes camping, if you've ever used like a solar lantern, you put the solar lantern outside, it spends all day like soaking up the sun, and it's very, very bright. And this is maybe, say, if you have an all-day training or you have a sort of an all-day sort of culture building kind of exercise. But what happens is that solar lantern starts to fade. It fades very quickly. And so if you don't get it back out in the sun again and again and again, it won't ever be as strong as it was. And so the question in that metaphor, the question is like, how do we take the sort of bolstering moments, these big moments, and sustain them over time? And that's very much about finding these moments that drive engagement, identifying them and highlighting them. And it's okay if you miss a few, and it's actually okay if you miss a lot. But if you consistently miss most of them, that's where culture starts to degrade.
Yeah, one of the things that's key to that, of course, is context. And the second framework that we're introducing today is what we call drivers of engagement. And this is done really at a participant level, your employee level. This takes into consideration what motivates them individually to want more, to do a better job, to feel like they're connecting to their employer, to be part of that culture that we're all aspiring to have as a robust, positive exchange. So we have 5 fundamental drivers that we leverage when we think about design programs and how we want to achieve a certain type of connection with our employees. This really came out of work that we've done over the last couple decades in kind of the consumer experience, consumer loyalty space. But these drivers really allow fundamentals of purpose to be established and identified, belonging, where employees are seen and valued, growth where they feel like they're learning. So this whole driver of, making me smarter, give me an opportunity to learn and progress where I feel like I'm doing that. Connection, where my contributions are being noticed, where I'm seen, right? And the last is really well-being, where my energy is respected. And so these drivers that that vary and on a participant or employee by employee level differ. But programs need to be identified and flexible that allows us to be able to identify, or at least be able to have an employee feel like, hey, what's really most important for me is, feeling like my work matters. And that's what's going to motivate me above anything else. Like and these could actually, if you divide this chart down the middle, you've got, emotional drivers on one side, rational drivers on our other side. Because us as individuals, we at times where I want more emotional benefits of it to keep me to lean in, or I want more rational things that are going to pull me into engagement. Each of these are really important. And what's interesting about this is, the drivers don't show up for any individual all at once. They show up and as well as drop in their value pretty much on every daily interaction. So you as a manager have to balance out all these dynamics as you think about engaging and facilitate engagement with your employees.
Mm-hmm. And I particularly love that idea of bringing what people experience in their day-to-day lives into the workplace, like understanding this is an incredibly researched area around what is it that motivates behavior both extrinsically and intrinsically, and bringing that into the workplace. Yeah, and I think that piece is really important as we make this pivot around what's really outside of those kind of understanding cultures, environments, and what we need to do. What are the drivers for individual employees? It's now this idea that AI is available. How are we going to maximize that? And it's this opportunity to rethink AI and how the role of it at work, because the best AI doesn't necessarily make decisions for people. It makes these moments that Sarita talked about more visible. And that's our opportunity. And not only just makes them more visible, it actually allows us to act on them faster, quicker, and more relevant. This is very aligned to the panel that we had just heard. So I think the theme that we had heard from all of the panelists was something to the effect of AI is great at compiling information, it's great at synthesizing information, but you don't want it making decisions. And so very much along the same lines, we have the same kind of core principles that AI can help connect dots and synthesize information. It can surface the information that you need to know. So for example, back to Max has, I think he had something like 11 direct reports. Keeping it all straight amongst the many fires he was putting out day to day is incredibly difficult. That's a great place for AI to come in and say, here's what you need to know. You're going into a one-on-one with Sammy, here's what you need to know. One thing I would point to too is what we heard, like that example of Max, based on what we've heard in some other client opportunities, is fairly easy. We had one interaction with one of our clients where their ratio was 1 to 127. So how do you create that capture all those moments and engage employees when your ratio of, manager to employees is 1 to 127? Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah. So at that point, it very much is about managing staff as a math exercise, exactly. More so than as a human exercise. Yeah. I was gonna say, tough to bring humanity into the equation. Yeah, for sure. Mm-hmm. Which one are you? Are you Nicole 1, 2, or 3? Yes. Okay, so should we move on to the next slide? Yeah. Especially given our time. By the way, our joke on the side was like, we knew we were going to run out of time at some point. But anyways, neither of us are known for being succinct. So the next part of that is as we think about AI, and we go back to the first framework that we shared, which is through the view of the flywheel. It becomes really clear that AI has this great opportunity to take moments so we don't lose context, right? So it surfaces insights, so connections become intentional, and it supports consistently so we get to that objective, which is how do we scale culture? But AI doesn't create that culture. In fact, the goal of it should be how do we remove it, how we remove friction that's presented inside our environments that stop culture from showing up every day. We also know, and again, I think the prior panel had talked about this a bit, we also know we have to be very open-eyed with AI. There are things that it does well and things that it is actually dangerous at. And so we have a number of guardrails. We have quite a few guardrails around bias, around equity, around inadvertently propagating things that most organizations don't want propagated. For us, as we look at them, there's a few things that are probably relevant even outside of what we do. One is just making sure that employees don't feel like they're being surveilled. There is very much a big brother sort of, when someone knows that an AI bot is actually listening in on your conversations, it can feel very uncomfortable and it can really damage safety for people. So finding a way to ensure that, like, very, very truly, that the AI monitoring sticks to the exact jobs that it's being asked to do and doesn't explore outside of that. Back to the earlier point around quantitative metrics and qualitative metrics, there's plenty of metrics. AI can tell you all kinds of numbers, but it can't tell you the context of what people are feeling. And not only that, it's like how somebody might be feeling Monday morning may be totally different than something they'd respond to Monday afternoon. So ultimately, we want to make sure that whatever programs you're running, if you're thinking about how do we use AI to help find those moments that can really scale culture, can really scale the cultural goals that you have for your organization, a huge part is just knowing that one size doesn't fit all. It's not only that one size doesn't fit all for one person, it doesn't fit all for like every moment in time.
So this is why, as we think about the role of HR is evolving, again, we don't have to tell you this, but we'll highlight that it's not just about managing systems. It's really about intentionally designing these experiences that focus on those moments, but moves this view about moments and the humanity of those moments into the cornerstone of how employees and managers connect, how managers help foster a healthy environment, and they can do it in an authentic way where they feel empowered and they feel effective.
Mm-hmm. Right. Bringing what you need to know when you need to know it, but not actually acting on it on your behalf. So back to Sammy and Max, as we think about this and we think about all of our research, particularly qualitative stories that we've had from so many people, we really often think about, we have these personas. So what would happen, say, if Sammy were in this situation? What would she want to know? If there's a new practice group around storytelling to clients, that's something she should know about. If there's a new mentor program of someone who's looking to build skills around dashboarding, that's also something she should know about. That's an opportunity for her. And so when we think about these little moments that happen throughout the day, again, collectively over time, we really think about not just scaling, of course, the work, but more importantly, scaling the human parts, scaling the belonging at work. And
so that's our time. 10 seconds, by the way.
10 seconds
so
left.
10-second advertisement is, so if you guys want to have questions after this, we're going to be outside at our booth with our team. Love to talk more. If you saw some slides that you thought are compelling, you want to follow up on, just reach out. I'm more than happy to share that with the team. And we just really appreciate the time today. And thanks for letting me be a part.